We are back on the CBB Central podcast. About a 10-day hiatus for us. We're going to record on Sunday. I'm glad we waited, Brad, because the timing worked out perfectly. We wound up with the Juwan Howard news dropping this morning. We had all the Michigan search really heated up on Monday. So glad we waited on the podcast. You sweated it for a couple of days. You're safe, my friend. Ed Cooley stays. I remember you saying, I hope they don't just lay him out and hire Juwan Howard or Billy Donovan or or hire from within because we won't get some coaching, carousel action. I think you're probably pretty pleased that you don't have any coaching carousel action, aren't you?
Yeah, I remember tweeting right when I saw that Beeline was going to the Cavs, something to the effect of like, I love that the coaching carousel is back in motion. And then Tuesday morning, I was thinking how ridiculous that sounds in hindsight, but couldn't have worked out better for Providence, except Cooley got some more money out of the school. But I mean the thing that was most upsetting to me was that Michigan fans didn't even want Cooley. So like we were potentially going to lose the coach that we need to have. We were going to lose him so late that we could, be, such hamstrung to find a replacement, and maybe the roster falls apart, to a team whose fans vehemently disagreed with the decision to hire Cooley.
Yeah, I mean it was kind of a mess. I mean, the Michigan fans they didn't want Juwan Howard, and then all of a sudden they really wanted Juwan Howard because the list came out. And I mean, I don't know how much it speaks to Michigan's job or whether it's just because I think Michigan itself is an attractive job. I think there's a lot of reasons why you wouldn't want to follow John Beeline, especially with not a great roster in place. I think that's a very reasonable thing to not want to do. But yeah, I mean, it was really interesting. I think, the best part of this whole thing for me is that Michigan hires a search firm, which says, "Oh, look, Ed Cooley, our old friend, gets Ed Cooley a raise and a contract extension," and then Michigan hires a guy who went to the university and called the athletic director personally on the phone, expressing his interest. We love a search firm.
Well, I guess the point of a search firm is to not look like St. John's, right? Where you don't have to publicly have every person who you call out on Twitter for people to make fun of you, because of this whole notion that the more candidates you ask, the worse your search is going. Which I disagree with that. I think that your basketball coach is such an important decision that who cares if you need to ask 20 people, as long as you can still get the best possible one. I would rather shoot too high and ask 20 people and get my 20th choice than to kind of do what Michigan did, right? They asked an alum, someone that the search firm was friends with, and one assistant. That's such a narrow pool, and I understand about the time constraints, but I mean Michigan's a big brand. They were in the championship game 2 years ago. They had a great team this year. They could have pulled someone. I don't care about the timing. They could have pulled a serious candidate. I just think that they didn't want to have the optics of the UCLA or the St. John's, where it looked unfocused and not centered on a certain group of candidates.
I think the feelers were out to the bigger names. I also think they kind of knew realistically, money-wise, that they weren't going to pony up the resources it would take for Chris Beard, Tony Bennett, Jay Wright, Billy Donovan, Brad Stevens. Because I think we're at a point right now in terms of the coaching carousel. There are a bunch of elite coaches who are compensated extremely well at their current positions, where it's going to be incredibly difficult, except for maybe 5 programs, to pull them from their current locations. I'm thinking Duke, Kentucky, Kansas, North Carolina are the only programs that can pull at this point a Chris Beard. You're going to need the Brinks truck. Tony Bennett, you're going to need a ton of money and a program that's seen as clearly better than Virginia. So that tier of names was not available for Michigan. So from there it becomes, okay, you have this long list of high major coaches who have won but aren't elite high major coaches. So Ed Cooley, Wojo, Chris Collins was thrown out by Jeff Goodman, which I still think is crazy. Who else? We got like Bobby Hurley, Bruce Weber. Like those are the names you're working with realistically. And then you've got like the up and coming coaches. So like Porter Mosier, like Rhodes, you would have Nate Oates if you hadn't gotten Bama. Like you have that tier, and then you have hiring from within or the NBA ranks. So I think from that perspective, like Michigan decided quickly on a candidate that they liked from pretty much each pool. The internal pool, they didn't really have the up and comer because Nate Oates wasn't available. The internal pool with Yaklich, who established himself over Saudi Washington. Then you have the sitting coaches Ed Cooley, and then you have the NBA guy Juwan Howard. So I think from that perspective, I don't know that they really mess things up too much in terms of not casting a wide enough net, and we don't really know what the interest level or the feelers that were put out.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the search firm did, ask millions of people. I thought Kelvin Sampson could be a dark horse. We touched on last time. He got in his new contract that his son would be the coach in waiting, and I mean he had success for like a year and a half at Indiana. It was a short run, but getting him back in the Big Ten with pay raise, and then his son gets a Houston job. I thought that made a lot of sense. It didn't seem like he was in the mix. I know, guys like Ben Howland or like Rick Barnes. Barnes almost outwardly said that he wanted to leave Tennessee, right? He was like, if the buyout was lower, I would be the UCLA coach. And then Ben Howland is just a strange fit at Mississippi State. So there were a bunch of guys who made some sense in just the fact that they're good coaches. Michigan's a bigger brand. But I mean, the thing that really shocked me was so many Michigan fans and kind of fans in general were down on Ed Cooley. I understand citing the offense, but I mean citing the NCAA tournament record. Like, if he's a Michigan coach, he's going to get better players, he's going to have a better seed, and he's going to win more. Like, the fact that people are like, oh, like we don't want the Providence coach because Providence is down here on the hierarchy and we're up here. Yeah, that's exactly why his tournament record is so bad, because he's not getting good enough seeds. If he goes to a bigger brand, the brand will help him recruit better. He's already a good recruiter, and you'll win more.
Yeah, I mean, I think the criticism is like they haven't won NCAA tournament games because they haven't had good seeds. But why haven't they had one good year with a good seed? And I think you would argue the year that with Dunn and Bentel probably should have been better.
No, I think it was the year before that where they were a 6th seed and they lost to Dayton in the first round, who just came out of the first 4.
So like Bryce Cotton.
Nope, that's you're 1 year off there. Oh. Yeah, so it was Dunn at the 1, Lindsay at the 2, Henton at the 3.
I loved Henton.
Bentel at the 4, and DeRozier at the 5. And they had Tyler Harris, they had Pascal Chukwu, Kyron Cartwright, and Junior Mamba. That was that team, which I love that team. And a side note, if Josh Fortune doesn't transfer late in the offseason, that team could have been like a 2 or 3 seed, because he was exactly what they were missing. But
brutal. Anyway, yes. I mean, right, they
you got me going.
They didn't have a great, like, a year that was clearly a top 15 team that they blew it. I mean, I think Ed Cooley would have. I think the tough thing with Ed Cooley was it was so clear that he is not the coach, that John Beilein is, right? Like, with Juwan Howard, there's a very high probability that he is nowhere close to what John Beilein ever was at Michigan. There's a high chance that he never does anything close, but you don't know that. Like, with Ed Cooley, you know what you're getting, and you know it's not John Beilein. You know you're getting, like, good, probably will make the tournament every year, probably will win some tournament games now that he has more talent. Will recruit, will be a great ambassador for a program, but he won't be John Beilein. Like with Juwan Howard, you have like the dream of like, oh, we're getting Bronny James and then like winning a national championship. I don't think you have that dream with Ed Cooley.
I mean, he's kind of hamstrung too. Being at Providence, it's the second smallest high major school behind Butler. Only 4,000 kids. So no matter what your facilities are, no matter how good your team is, some kids are going to want to go to a big school. So that's a major disadvantage. And I know they've had a bunch of targets who they were in on, but because it was Providence, they were kind of strung along as like a courtesy, or like they would have gone to Providence had their list not blown up. Specifically Donovan Mitchell, Wenyan Gabriel, James Young. I mean, those guys are going to Michigan if they have the same relationship with Ed Cooley, but Michigan versus Providence.
Right, and I think I was on the record. I think he'd do well there. He eventually pulls out of the search. We don't really know why, whether that was, I'm getting the job and I don't want it, or I'm not getting the job, so I might as well make it look good. Whatever it was, he winds up out of the search. Makes it pretty clear that it's going to be Juwan Howard. Luke Yaklich hung in. I know there were reports yesterday that he had received, yesterday being Tuesday, that Juwan Howard had been offered the job, within hours of Ed Cooley being out of the search. That was not true, per sources. It did take until today before things really transpired. But in the end, it does wind up going to Juwan Howard. It'll be interesting. I think the connection, with LeBron and with Dwayne Wade will certainly help. I mean, at this point, Zaire Wade is a lock to Michigan if they want him, and I'm sure they will. Just from the perspective of he's a Wade and he's a top 150 kid, you obviously take him. I think the bigger concern is what does he do with this roster right now? Because, I mean, they have 3 open right now. They could be open with more if Kolbajima leaves, if anyone transfers as well. And they have no star power, right? Xavier Simpson and John Teske were very good in the construct of John Beilein. And now they're going to be in a very different context without, 3 high-level wings. And it's going to be real hard to go get them because Jalen Wilson's not coming back without Luke Yaklich. I'm sorry. It's just not going to happen. So, I mean, Michigan, they're going to have to find a way to fill some spots. There's not going to be a lot that's out there. I think they'll probably push for some reclassifying guys, and the grad transfer market's even kind of juiced out at this point. So, I mean, it'll be interesting. I don't think this will be a tournament team. One thing I will note, Juwan Howard took $2 million. John Beilein was making 3.8. I would imagine that means they will be able to build a very strong staff. I don't know what that staff will look like, whether Sadie Washington or DeAndre Haynes will be retained. I've been told once again, Luke Yaklich is very likely headed to Texas to join Shaka Smart's staff. But it will be very interesting to see what he can do in a late turnaround type situation in terms of putting a roster together for this year and then obviously going forward on the recruiting trail. Yeah,
I think with Beilein, I think a lot of people would be ranking this Michigan team just off of the fact that it's John Beilein will figure it out. But I mean, losing 3 guys, pretty much at the same position, where if they just had one of them, then I think everybody ranks this team, right? If Poole stays in and you're going to roll with a Simpson, Brooks, Poole, Livers, Teske. I mean, all those guys were in the rotation last year. So that's 5 of the top 7 guys. That's probably a top 15 team. But the fact that they don't have anyone to replace any of those wings, and you mentioned they're kind of missing the star power now. Where now the whole roster could be beefed up by a strong grad transfer wing, but without that it's very oddly constructed. I think Teske and Simpson could make a jump, but they're not. I mean, they're not go-to scorers, and I don't think that they really can be. I think that they can be nice second and third pieces, but they're missing that top guy.
Well, I think so. I'll frame it this way. I mean, I think Michigan was seen as a favorite for Javen Cumberland before John Beilein left. Let's say they get Javen Cumberland. He starts at the 2. You grab a 3-man. Maybe toss in and then you're Teske at the 5. You still got to find. I guess Livers at the 4. mean, you could. I mean, let's just say their starting lineup first game next year is Xavier Simpson, Javen Cumberland, Kolbajima. Then we're gonna go Livers to the 4, Teskey at the 5. Like what offensive system is being run by Juwan Howard? Is he gonna just put people on ball screens? I mean, can you really just play spread pick and roll with Xavier Simpson who can't shoot and like John Teskey just throwing him lobs? I mean, like their offense is just gonna be really hamstrung in my mind, unless they're running stuff because. I mean, they ran so many good sets, and like that's just not going to transfer over from Beeline. He's a genius. Like the whole Chin series that they run, they just have so many easy action, quick hitters combined with elite offensive talent on the wing this season. They don't have either now, so it'll be really interesting. They got work to do. And one thing I think this kind of transitions a little bit pretty easily into Washington with Jaden McDaniels is Jaden McDaniels is like Juwan Howard's cousin. Is that what I read?
Yes.
And he commits in the middle of the night to Washington the day before Juwan Howard gets a head coaching job in an elite school that could absolutely use his services.
I mean, Jaden McDaniels is probably better off at the 4, but he could certainly fit in at Michigan's hole at the 3.
I mean, he's a top 10 recruit for Michigan. I mean, like he had taken if you get him. But I mean,
yeah.
I mean, the whole thing.
If he can only play the 5. You would take him, You don't turn down that type of talent.
I think the interesting thing with him, I mean, the whole deal was like he doesn't want to be kind of in the fishbowl and like stared at all the time. Like that was the whole reason why he came in the middle of the night and like why Kentucky wasn't the right choice for him. He wanted to be under the radar, and I guess Michigan probably would have been a bit more on the radar. I mean, it wouldn't have been Kentucky, but it certainly would have been. The constant stuff. I mean, it's a really interesting move. I mean, we'll talk Washington in terms of where we rank them. I don't know if you updated for that, Brad, when you're making your top 25, but it's a weird team because if you think about it, Quade Green is very similar to David Crisp. And, Noah Dickerson is probably a worse version of Isaiah Stewart. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
So, like, you're replacing Thibault and Jalen Noel, the best player in the Pac-12 and the best defender in the Pac-12 and probably the best defender in the country, with like a combo forward who can like really do it in Isaiah Carter and like Raekwon Battle. I mean, I don't know how much better they're going to be. I think they'll be better. I think they're rankable. I think especially at this time of the year you have to. But like this is not a top 10 team. I don't know if people are doing that, but just because they have 2 top 5 recruits, but this is not a top 10 team.
Yeah, I tended to. I mean, we'll get this more later, but I tentatively just threw them in kind of the middle of the top 25 for now, like 15 or 16.
Mm-hmm.
I think if Jalen Noel comes back, I think you could easily argue that they're a top 10 team, if not higher. But they do kind of have a hole at the 2. Probably either go big with like Jamal Bay or you mentioned Raekwon Battle as a freshman steps in there. But I mean, Carter could break out. Maybe Quade Green will kind of flourish without having to look over his shoulder. And then you have a really strong front court even behind McDaniels and Stewart. You have guys who have played in Hamir Wright and Timmons. I'm not a huge Timmons guy, but he's a senior. He'll be a good backup center for them. And then Wright can give them some small looks. He was a starter for part of the year. Washington also loses Dominic Green, who played a pretty big role as a lengthy shooter at that 2-3 spot. But just one last thing on Michigan and Juwan Howard. Juwan Howard isn't Chris Mullen, right? I mean, he was a well respected assistant coach. I'm pretty sure he's coached their summer league teams at least. And I would think coming from the NBA, especially a team like Miami that runs funky lineups, they're not afraid to play small with Eric Spoelstra as the coach, or do things like run Justice Winslow at point guard. I think that Howard could be able to utilize all the spacing in the shooters that Michigan has. I know you mentioned Simpson's not a shooter and Brooks really isn't either. But Livers and Teskey at the 4 and the 5 can both stretch the floor. Beijing is a shooter. I know Adrian Nunez will be a sophomore, And if the season started today, he would be playing a lot. He's billed as a shooter as well. So maybe Juwan Howard can kind of leverage their kind of outside shooting front court, kind of make this Michigan offense a little more dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably the best way of going about it if you are Michigan. But there's so much like we don't know about this roster, and we don't know what Juwan Howard's going to do. We don't know what the staff's going to look like. We don't know who's going to transfer because, I mean, kind of looking at things, I would sort of doubt that anyone of like major consequence were to leave at this point. I mean, you might see like an Eli Brooks get up and go, or like Colin Castleton, but in terms of like Livers Teskey and Simpson are safe. They're not going anywhere, you would imagine. So they do have that going for them. I will say that.
So you want to move on to Washington here?
Yeah, I mean, I just kind of touched on them really quickly. I have them 16 in my top 25, which we'll go through in just a few moments. But I mean, I think Noel's gone. I think that he basically made it. He made that clear. I mean, they could change, but he also had a pretty good couple days in the combine process, from what I hear. He seems to be pretty much gone. You never know. But I mean, he was in the Pacers today, or excuse me, yesterday. But I mean, this group is talented. I mean, we'll see. I saw John Rothstein projected Quad A, Jamal Bay, Jaden McDaniels, Samir Wright, Isaiah Stewart, and play Jaden 3. I don't really buy that. I think you absolutely start Isaiah Carter, who I think is really good. I think he's best in like a lower usage role. But I mean, we'll see. I think this roster is very similar to what it was last year. If you look at what they struggled to do last year, I mean, they were pretty lucky. They won a lot of close games. The one thing that they didn't do was, rebound, and they'll rebound better, I would say, with Isaiah Stewart at the 5. I do think there are challenges, just kind of with the zone in general. You're never going to be a great defensive rebounding team when you play zone, but they were putrid, and I don't think that will repeat itself. So I mean, that's one area to improve, but I think in general, I mean, like Jalen Noel is a pro scorer. I don't think that's as easily replaced as people will think, just because you have a top 5 recruit coming in.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Doesn't look like they're going to add like a grad transfer 2 guard or anything. So it looks like, I mean, there's not too much out there, but I mean, we mentioned Javen Cumberland earlier, and like he wouldn't add a lot of length, which certainly looks to be a priority for Hopkins, with the zone. But he would be a nice scorer next to Quade Green. Although that would be a small backcourt and not really Syracuse-esque, but they could use that perimeter scoring punch. But yeah, I think that this is clearly the second best team in the Pac-12. I think probably should rank them. Would not be surprised to see them, as you mentioned, kind of stall and fall back into 8-9 seed range.
Yeah, I mean, and the other thing is, like, they made their money on defense last year. The zone will probably keep them pretty good on defense, but they had the best steal rate in the country, the 4th best block rate in the country, and the 4th best turnover rate in the country. I got two words as to why that was the case. Matisse Thybulle. That's gone. I mean, like Noah Dickerson did a pretty solid job being a shot blocker. It wasn't great. It wasn't terrible. I mean, I think Isaiah Stewart can replicate that, but like Matisse Thybulle was single-handedly dominant on defense, like the type of year that we haven't seen. And I think people are going to underestimate losing that in terms of their defensive efficiency, especially when you're going to play like Raekwon Battle a lot of minutes, Jamal Bay a lot of minutes, Jaden McDaniels a freshman, even though I think he'll be really fun in the zone, a lot of minutes, Isaiah Stewart a lot of minutes. I think that's something people are going to overlook.
And then, I think teams that rely a lot on a freshman one-and-done type big man, I think they always get overrated. Now, I don't have really the data to back it up, just kind of have some like anecdotal situations. But I mean, you look at all these Texas teams, right, from Jackson Hayes, Miles Turner, Cam Ridley, Jared Allen, and then you look at Baylor with Isaiah Austin. It seems like teams that need like a freshman big man, even if the freshman big man is very good, they kind of underachieve. I don't really know why that is, but I mean Western Kentucky with Charles Bassey this year too.
I mean, so my perspective with this is like you have to know why the big man is highly rated. I think a lot of times with these highly touted big men, it's a potential overproduction play. Like let's say Jared Allen, for instance. I mean, he had an intriguing physical package, but was not ready to shoulder the load, and he was kind of needed to. With this Washington team, one, because you have Quade Green, Jaden McDaniels, and Neziah Carter, Raekwon Battle, like that group. You shouldn't need Isaiah Stewart to shoulder the load offensively. I think you can need it. You need like 13 points a game out of him. And two, Isaiah Stewart's rep is like he has an absurd motor, like super like athletic and like gonna play hard and rebound and be just like an absolute terror on both ends in that regard. And I think those skills will play well as a one and done big versus like, ooh, I'm 7 feet tall and I can shoot threes and block shots, but like I'm still learning how to play basketball.
That's fair. Just a couple other guys I want to throw out. Bol, fits the mold that you described. Yes, 7-footer, shoots threes and block shots. He was on Oregon when they were at their worst, like losing by games. Bamba, I guess he kind of underachieved. Marvin Bagley, Wendell Carter, and DeAndre Ayton certainly did not underachieve. Mitchell Robinson bailed. Brandon McCoy, UNLV underachieved with him. Nick Richards wasn't really a factor for Kentucky. There's one guy who I can't remember who I'm trying to piece together. Bam was fine. Marcus Bolden was a bust. Oh well. Yeah, I guess that. Andre Drummond was who I was thinking of for a UConn, who was on like a stacked UConn team in terms of talent, and they flamed out. And then Steven Adams, I'm not sure if that Pitt team underachieved, but I know him personally was nowhere near the player that he became in the NBA.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'll buy that. I think the data does show that. I just think generally with Stewart, based on what's around him and based on kind of what he's expected to bring, I think they'll be in good shape. Another point that I saw brought up on Twitter today that I think is pretty interesting is like one of the main things that young big guys struggle with is, handling pick and roll situations defensively. And, he won't have to do that playing in the zone. So I think that is also one thing to note there. But without further ado, I believe, Brad, we should probably get into these top 25. If not, we'll chat here all night, which kind of no objections from me, but I'm sure the listeners have better things to do. So how much has changed for you in the last, 6 weeks since we did it last?
A lot. I mean, I just scrubbed mine and started from the beginning. Basically, my process is I rank, Big East, AAC, every conference separately, and then I grouped A10 and Mountain West with the mid majors. So basically, when I'm comparing teams, I'm only looking at 8, right? Because if I have Memphis first in the AAC and I haven't put Memphis on the board yet, I'm not going to look at Houston's roster, right? Because I already established that Memphis is better. So that kind of streamlined the process for me. But I found this to be even more difficult than last time. I think there's a clear top 4 for me. I know I looked at Gary Parrish's rankings, and ours are pretty different. But for me, I think the clear top 4 is Michigan State at number 1, Kentucky at number 2, Duke number 3, and Arizona at number 4. I feel strongly about 1 and 4, and I think you could flip 2 and 3, Duke and Kentucky around.
Okay, so I have Michigan State 1, Kentucky 2, Duke 3. Again, those two are very interchangeable. And at number 4, I have the Memphis Tigers. So, I mean, that's just kind of like this roster's really full. They fit well together in theory. The only question for me is overall youth and Boogie Ellis not being a true point guard. but there's still the chance of RJ Hampton, especially given the rumors right now about Rajon Tucker's academic ineligibility, which would potentially bring RJ Hampton to Memphis. So I think from that perspective, I'm gonna go heavy on Memphis. That's the reason why I kept Kansas a lot lower. I have Kansas at 13. Spoiler alert there, just because they don't have RJ Hampton yet. I've seen a lot of people rank them top 5 just because they have RJ Hampton. But I will say this: if Kansas got RJ Hampton, got Devin Dotson back, and got Jalen Wilson, they'd be my number 2.
Yeah, I mean they would certainly be very high. For my spoiler alert on Kansas, I have them at 11. They're going to have a great point guard in Dotson if he comes back, and then they have a game changing center in Udoka Azubuike, and they have guys who have really cut their teeth. Guys like Marcus Garrett, who's a great glue guy who can play multiple positions. Ochai Agbaji plays some 3, will play some 4. His performance kind of teetered off toward the end there, but he had a real strong portion. If he can continue to build on that as a sophomore, Kansas is going to be really good.
Yeah, I think they're in really good shape. If they're in a weird spot where, like, if Dotson doesn't come back and they don't get Hampton, they're like unrankable in my mind, just because the backcourt would just kind of be a tire fire. But if they get Dotson back and add RJ Hampton, they should be the number 2 team in the country, maybe number 1. I think Michigan State probably should be, but like,
is the door completely closed on Quentin Grimes coming back?
I don't care if Quentin Grimes comes back,
even as a sophomore.
Like, I mean, he was legit bad. Assuming.
I mean, he was certainly bad compared to expectation. But I mean, he would certainly average double figures. Yeah, he would play good defense. He's a smart player. He would have to really improve that jumper.
Okay, so my perspective on it would be, like, if you can get RJ Hampton, like if they get RJ Hampton, and then you add him, so you go Dotson, Hampton, you'll have like Jalen Wilson, Agbaji, Marcus Garrett. Like, I'd rather play the guys who are complete players like Agbaji all those minutes over Quentin Grimes, because you're not gonna play Grimes over Hampton or Dotson. So, like, at best he's like backup combo guard, and then like you're not gonna play him at the 3 because I'd rather play the complete player like Agbaji.
Well, I think that there's certainly enough minutes to go around if Kansas went Dodson, Hampton, Grimes, Agbaji with Garrett as a 6th man.
Yeah, I guess I could buy that. And there's still Jalen Wilson around, like, potentially, and so I mean, we'll see. I think I was very sour. I have very much soured there with Quentin Grimes, and didn't think he looked that good in the pre-draft stuff that I watched personally. Like, I didn't think he was like all of a sudden revelatory. So I think from that perspective, it's pretty difficult for me to have any confidence that in what he provides. But I mean, he wouldn't. I mean, he's not going to make their team worse. But if Quentin Grimes comes back, I'm not like vaulting Kansas. Is, I guess, my argument.
Yeah, I watched the first day of combine scrimmages, and he still doesn't shoot it well. I think he hit 1 or 2 outside shots, but it's a real stiff shot. It's a real hard ball. He made some really nice passes, but I think people confuse being able to pass well with being a point guard, because he is by no stretch of the imagination point guard. He can, if he started and played the full starters minutes, he'd average 3 or 4 assists per game as a good secondary creator. But for him to really become like a relevant NBA player, he needs to shoot a lot better.
Yeah, I would completely agree. So it'll be interesting. I mean, Kansas is one of those teams where, like, the next 3 weeks will define them being, like, potentially unranked to top 2. So they're interesting. Number 5, I have Louisville. I have 6 Texas Tech, 7 North Carolina, 8 Maryland, 9 Arizona, and 10 Virginia.
Okay. So I saw a tier of 4 after the top 4. And for me, that was Maryland at 5, Memphis at 6, UNC at 7, and Texas Tech at 8. And I saw these teams, almost indistinguishable. I think that they're all so close together. I put Texas Tech at 8 because I think that they have the least star power in that group. I mean, their best player is probably Chris Clark or Davide Moretti, which I think UNC with Cole Anthony, Memphis with Wiseman, and Maryland with Smith and Anthony Cowan. I'm assuming all the returners are actually back. I think that gives them the edge over Texas Tech, but Texas Tech has a really tight 8 or 9 man roster. They don't have a lot of size, but very long, very athletic. I think Clark is a great fit at the 4, and I'm interested to see if they can go the 3 guards, which I think would be getting their best players on the floor, playing Moretti, Ramsey, and Edwards together.
Yeah, I mean, I love what they did with Clark. I thought the fit was superb. Kind of going with that, I think they have a lot of options because they could play that Tyreek Smith kid they just got. I mean, he could just be like an energy big off the bench. Seemed like they chose him over Khalid Thomas. His numbers were not great in JUCO. Were Khalid Thomas, so maybe that was just kind of a mutual thing. We're not really interested in you anymore, and we want another big, so let's just do that. So I mean, that's an interesting perspective there. But I think the guards, the small ball is going to be what they have to do. Ramsey's really physical, so I think that helps. He's got a game-ready body, very strong kid. So I think him playing the 3 can work. Yeah, I think they're in really good shape roster-wise. I think they're going to play great defense because they still have Mark Adams on staff. Just a really, really good, well-coached team with athletes who can score the ball. I think Kyler Edwards is going to be awesome. We're still kind of sleeping on guys like Kevin McCullough, who was a good recruit, sat last year. Terrence Shannon, good recruit. I don't know how much he's going to play. They've got depth that they didn't have this year in terms of talent. And I think it'll be really interesting to see what Chris Beard can put together with this. I mean, assuming they can't get Hampton. So I have them at 6. But I do agree. I think that tier generally is pretty close. I had Louisville at 5. I know you didn't say them yet. I have them. They're tentative with Jordan Mora. I think if he's gone, you can't go that high. But I mean, with Fresh Kimball, with him, with Samuel, with Williamson, I mean, I think this group is really good. They're in, what's the big kid's name? The freshman.
Enoch or Iggy Han?
Yeah, Iggy Han. I mean, he'll bring energy. He's like a top 40 recruit. Enoch's good. And I think they've got a really nice group in place. So 5 might be a reach, but feel pretty good about it.
Could you say you're a 5 to 10 again?
Yeah, Louisville 5, Texas Tech 6, Carolina 7, Maryland 8, Arizona 9, Virginia 10.
Yeah, so
pretty similar.
So what's going on with Virginia there? Is it just we're just going to say Tony Bennett's going to figure it out?
Yeah, I mean, it's like Tony Bennett's going to play defense. I mean, you're going to play they still have Kihei, Casey Morsell, Wilden Tenze, who's the JUCO guard, and Diakite, I think, will be back. So it is betting on him being there. Jay Huff can shoot a little bit. You get some post up for Cafaro when he comes in the game. I mean, yeah, the roster's not super there, but they'll be good defensively. They'll still, I think, be decent offensively. They'll run the same actions that they have. It's probably high, but I mean, it's a bet I'm willing to take.
I didn't rank Virginia. I couldn't. I had 29 teams that going in I thought I would be ranking. Virginia was one where I was thinking we'll see if there's room for them. And I had 29 for 25. So they're number 30 for me right now. I mean the roster is if any other team had this roster, they wouldn't even be considered for the tournament. I mean, they have a glue guy point guard, they have a JUCO transfer, and then that's the starting backcourt, and then you have Morsell, who's a top 75-ish recruit, and then you have a bunch of good centers. I mean, they could have the best collection of centers, or one of the top collections of centers with Giacchite, Huff, and Cafaro. You're gonna end up playing two of those guys together. You're gonna slide Key up to the 3. I mean, you would need Key to have like a reversion to his Alabama days. Like, how are they gonna score? It's a mess. I mean, I guess that they'll figure it out, but I don't see figuring out being a top 10 team. I see figuring out being like a tournament team.
Yeah, I mean, I think just, we talked about going down the list and seeing who you're confident in, and like, I don't know that I'm more confident in other teams to, quote unquote, figure it out with, like I don't know that I'm more confident that some of these teams with question marks, like Seton Hall's roster is better, but like, I'm more confident in Tony Bennett winning games than I am Kevin Willard, and like that matters to me just based on how they're going to play defense, and like the worst year offensively that Tony Bennett has had since 2013. They were 83rd in offensive efficiency. That was also their worst defensive year, 25th, and that team still was top 40 in KenPom, and still made still top 40 in KenPom, still won 11 ACC games, and they're now recruiting a much higher level of player than they were on that team. Like,
well, that team had 2 NBA players. I mean, technically 3, but I mean, they had Joe Harris and Justin Anderson.
They did indeed. Justin Anderson was a freshman who played 20 minutes a game, but.
And I mean, this team doesn't have anywhere near of even like the same recruiting talent.
They also had Northern Iowa legend Paul Jesperson, for what it's worth.
Because, like, I mean, Akeel Mitchell was an excellent player. Toby had a cup of coffee in the NBA, but he was a very highly rated recruit. Anderson was a top 50 recruit. Darian Atkins turned out to be good. I don't think he was great this year, but I mean, they had a lot more talent than I think that. Like the 2013 talent is on a whole different level than the talent this year. I mean, out of their projected starting lineup, they have. I mean, Key was a top 60 recruit, Huff was top 75, and Giacchite was top 75.
And more so.
You think he's gonna start?
Yeah. Yeah, I think they're gonna go 3 guards. Play Walden Tenzay at the 3, and like Key at the 4, Diakite at the 5, Huff is the backup 4, backup 5 would be Cafaro, and then I mean you run out of guards, and they're not done, so we'll see if they can add. But I mean, the thing is, with you're absolutely right that the roster indicates that they're not going to be a top 10 team. But it's almost just an interesting case study in how far can a good defense take you? Because let's go back in KenPom history and see if we can find some top 5 defenses that weren't good teams. So to Kansas State this year, terrible offense, still top 25 team. Wisconsin, top 5 defense, top 25 team. Let's go back to last year, adjusted defenses. Cincinnati, the top 5 defenses last year were Virginia, Cincinnati, Michigan, Texas Tech, Syracuse.
Yeah, but Kevin, all these teams have NBA players. Like Wisconsin has Ethan Happ, Kansas State, NBA, might be a stretch, but guys like Barry Brown, Dean Wade, Xavier Sneed. I mean, these are really good players. Cincinnati last year had Jacob Evans, Gary Clark.
Yeah, no, I guess my argument would be we don't know that these guys aren't NBA players yet, right? Like the history shows you can't be a top 5 defense and not be a good basketball team. It's statistically almost impossible to not be a top 5 seed and occasionally a Syracuse or a Virginia in 2012 that isn't a very good seed. I'm going back to I'm going back there. The last top 5 defense to not be a top to not be an NCAA tournament team. Here's one. Alabama in 20 11 was number 7 in defense, and they missed the NCAA tournament, and they went to the NIT with Anthony Graham. That team still had an NBA player though, in JaMychal Green, but I don't know. I will be monitoring this as like a case study for elite defenses and what it can do. How far can it take you?
Fair enough.
All right, we can talk about this all day.
All right, so I'll go with, because I had another clear tier of 4, but okay, the gap for 8 to 9 for me was enormous. But so 9 I have Louisville, 10 I have Creighton, 11 I have Kansas, and 12 I have Seton Hall. I feel relatively confident. Kind of similar to last year, where we had like 1 or 2 main tiers at the top of the rankings, and then around this stage, around 9 or 10, a team, there has to be a team that's the 9th best team in the country, but they just don't feel like it. They look more of like a 15 to a 20 team, and that's kind of how I feel about these 4 teams. I mean, Creighton, if Crumpler comes back, I'm very high on them. Tyshawn Alexander's an excellent player. Jefferson will be healthy. Zagorowski will be healthy, and Zagorowski is a big key as a scoring guard for this team. And then in Seton Hall, they're going to be big, right? They have Mamukilishvili, they have Ike Obiagu, and they have Romero Gill. So I mean, they're going to do a little differently. But as long as Miles Powell comes back, they'll have the perimeter scoring. It's going to be a great defensive team, and they can play different ways. Guys like Jared Rhoden and Anthony Nelson really came on late in their freshman years last year.
Yeah, so we're not way off here. I mean, I'm a little lower on both the Big East teams you mentioned there. I have Seton Hall at 14. I have Creighton at 18. I have Kansas at 13, as I mentioned before. You had them in that group, but I mean, we're both generally on the right. I would say the right track there. I'll go 10 through 15, 9 to 12, or 11 through 15, because I had Virginia at 10. So I had Villanova at 11. We debated this last time. Nothing's really changed with them in terms of their roster. Ohio State at 12, bumped them down a little bit from last time. Mostly just because of other action. Still really like DJ Carton. Really like Gaffney and Liddell. I think they'll be in really good shape. And then Kansas at 13, Seton Hall at 14, Alabama at 15. Jeff Goodman went really high with them, like 11. Not quite ready to go there, but I mean, I think Kira Lewis is going to be like All-American level good for Nate Oates, and they're going to play defense. They're going to hustle. They're going to get out and go. They've got guards. Their front court's better shape than people think. I really like this Bama team.
Yeah, so I have Bama starting my tier 4 at number 13, but I don't feel good about that at all. And specifically, I think in the SEC, Kentucky's clearly number 1, and then 2 through 6 for me. I had a really difficult time differentiating between those teams, and for me, I think that 13 to 29 for me is a tier, which is enormous. But that's just how close I think these teams are in the national landscape. But specifically with the SEC, Alabama, Florida, Mississippi State, LSU, and Georgia. I have them in that order. I don't feel confident about it at all. So wanted some feedback from you, where or how you would organize Alabama, Florida, Mississippi State, LSU, and Georgia.
Okay, so I ranked Alabama 15. I ranked Florida at 17. I ranked Mississippi State at 23. I ranked Georgia at 25. And I did not rank LSU.
Now, for you with LSU, was that with Mays and Williams?
That was without Mays, with Williams.
Okay, yeah, because without Mays, I would also drop them out of the top 25.
I mean, if they can run like, what would be Smart, Mays,
Taylor,
Watford, Williams,
and then you'd have Darius Days and
Got
Charles
Frank.
Manning off the bench.
Yeah, you probably rank them. Yeah. I
So
mean, it's a lot to lose. But Tremont is such a good point guard, and like Javante didn't do that this year. But yeah, I think you rank them to get both back.
I had the same order as you, except flip Georgia and LSU. So that makes me feel better. But obviously, Florida gets Nemhard back. Mississippi State gets Perry back. LSU gets the two we mentioned, and then Georgia gets Nick Claxton back. I think if any of those teams lose those guys, I would bump them from the rankings just because of how close for me 13 and 29 are.
Yeah, I would bump Georgia out of the rankings. I still think they're a tournament team though, without Claxton, because they'll still have like Hammonds. They'll still have some of the other guards from this year who weren't very good. They'll still have obviously Anthony Edwards, who's terrific, and Dano Gresham, good grad transfer. So, I mean, it's really tight. It's weird to say Bama's our second best bench. Go ahead.
Georgia's bench is littered with top 100 freshmen too. I mean, it's freshmen, but that's a good spot to have where you don't need those top 100 freshmen to be instant impact guys. Where you have, I mean, you need Edwards as like the top 3 player in the class to be instant impact, and then you have a bunch of veterans who can start, and then you can kind of ease those freshmen in, like your Christian Brown, Severe Wheeler, Jaquan Walton, and then the sophomore Amanzi Ingumzi.
Yes, would completely agree there. Yeah, I mean, with Claxton, I mean, this team has really high potential because I think Claxton's super underrated and was kind of played out of position this year, especially offensively. You give Edwards the ball, he's going to be great in ball screens. He'll really score the basketball. He's super athletic. I mean, it could be a lot of fun to watch this Georgia team with Tom Crean get up and down. But yeah, I mean, I have them 25 right now. Don't want to venture too far away. I mean, it's pretty crazy in my mind to have Bama as the second best team in the SEC right now. And I could be sold on Florida as one, especially if Nemhard's back. But it'll be really, really interesting. But yeah, so I had Villanova, Ohio State, Kansas, Seton Hall, and Bama to get me to 15.
Okay, so I'll go my 13 through we'll go 13 through 16 for me. Alabama at 13. Great point guard in Kira Lewis. They have a good supporting cast on paper. They're going to need Petty, Mac Jones to kind of realize a little more of their potential to hit that ranking. But they have a lot of depth. They add Beetle Bolden. Alex Reese has a stretch 4. Maybe he plays some small ball 5 too. He's experienced off the bench. They just got James Rojas, who was a JUCO All-American, I believe. So I mean they're fine in terms of depth, and that's part of the reason why they're so intriguing. Florida, who I have at 14, they aren't super deep, right? Ranking them this high is saying, I really like their perimeter 5-some, right? Of Man, Nemhard, Locke, Lewis, and then Keontae Johnson at that small ball 4, and they have a large cast of characters competing for minutes at the 5. But I think that's enough. To be ranked at 14 again. You have an NBA wing in Scotty Lewis. You have shot makers. You have a great point guard in Nemhard. And then 15, Florida State, kind of similar to Alabama, and this is an extremely deep team. And Leonard Hamilton is one to use that depth. I think they're a top level talent is a little missing. I'm a huge Trent Forrest guy, and I think MJ Walker has been a little bit of a forgotten guy, but I'm not sure how good they'll be with them as their 2 best players. So that's something to watch. If they had Kevin Gelly back, they'd be top 5 maybe. And then 16, I have Washington, which we mentioned earlier. That's a tentative spot, but I think it's reasonable. But I think with some more thought and kind of more analysis, maybe I move them down a tad.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting. I mean, Florida State's an interesting team. It was a team that I went to rank around 20, looked at their roster again, decided against it. I mean, let's build that rotation though, right? They're gonna go what? So Forrest at the 1.
Forrest is the 1. This past year, and then Walker at the 2.
Walker at the 2.
The 3 where it gets interesting. You have Devin Vassell, who came on late. You also have a borderline 5-star in Patrick Williams. Was top 30 recruit in the mix. Probably one of those two guys gets the nod at the 3. Then
Let's say Williams at the 3.
And then the other one would be the 6th man. Then at the 4, you could either go Raekwon Gray or Malik Osborne, the Rice transfer.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the 5, probably Olenejic. And then you also have Balsa Capriza, who's a top 75 center. So that's 8 right there. And then I'm guessing number 9 would be their only other ball handler, which would be Raekwon Evans, who's like a combo guard type. So that's their 9-man rotation, and they have other guys, a guy like Anthony Polite, who was in and out of the rotation this year as a redshirt freshman too.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of good players there. I'm not sold on any one of them going to like all ACC good. Like maybe Forrest. I think Forrest is probably the guy who do it, but I think he's probably best in a lower usage role. Walker, I've never been super impressed by. I mean, Privis's stock has really dropped. It's kind of interesting to see. And I mean, Williams, I think, is the X factor there. If Williams pans out, I think they definitely are rankable. But I think they're rankable now. But they're definitely a team you rank. If not, I think keeping them out as I did is reasonable. But interestingly, we both had Washington at 16. So great minds think alike there, Brad. I had Florida at 17. Which was, I think, around, in that same general range as you did. Just like you said, really like the guards. Creighton at 18, touched on them earlier. VCU at 19 and Gonzaga at 20. This is where, like, Gonzaga gets ranked for me because partially they're going to win a million games. And, I mean, Mark Hughes is a really good coach, and the front court's going to be really good. Still a little concerned, especially without Norvell, but I think Gilder will give them some minutes that are productive. And Gonzaga at 20 is probably the highest you can go. I mean, I've seen them at 10 in multiple preseason top 25s, which I think is, nuts. I know you certainly agree.
Yeah, if I couldn't rank them when they had Zach Norvell, certainly can't rank them now that they've downgraded there because they still don't have a point guard. I mean, if Gilder was a point guard, right? He's not a point guard, but you have these two really good guards. So be like, all right, they'll make that work. They'll have enough talent. But the AIE or Rave it with Gilder, that doesn't inspire a lot of confidence for me. The front court is very good, but it is very young. I would guess a guy like Anton Watson sees a lot of time at the 4, or where he could be very effective there. He's like a 6'9", 6'10", combo forward type. And they have a lot of centers. But that only does you so good, right? Having 4 top 75 freshman centers, because you can really only play 1, maybe 2 centers at a time. But the interesting thing about Gonzaga, so Kevin, you had St. Mary's ahead of them before, right?
I don't remember. I think I did. Yeah.
Because I previously was higher on Gonzaga than St. Mary's. I've since flip-flopped, and St. Mary's was one of the teams that I thought I would be ranking. They end up coming in at like 28 for me, so like just outside. But that's the team that's pretty much running it back. We'll see if they get Aaron Menzies' 6th year. He was a grad transfer from Seattle who missed this year, but Jordan Ford can really score. They have Malik Fitz. They found a point guard in Tommy Hughes last year. They have some nice auxiliary pieces. If Menzies doesn't get a waiver and or isn't healthy, going to rely a lot on Matthias Tass at center, former top 100 recruit. Shows St. Mary's over like Georgia Tech, a few of the schools. If he can make a jump as a sophomore, they could be in really good shape.
Yeah, kind of thinking back, I do think I did rank St. Mary's over Gonzaga. I had them at 26, just the first team out of the field. So if Utah State were to lose Kada and they fall out, I would put in St. Mary's. I just kind of looked at it and I was like, the talent disparity between Gonzaga and St. Mary's is really big. And I think, they're really well coached. Jordan Ford's terrific. But at the end of the day, like, I just really want to bet on some of these guys for Gonzaga taking steps forward. It's something that has been a very solid strategy given what Mark Few has done for the better part of the last 2 decades. So I mean, I think the range between 20 and 26 is not very large. So not a ton separating them, but I will take Gonzaga for now. Interested in your thoughts on VCU. Did you rank them, Brad, and where?
VCU was ranked at number 25, got bumped out by Washington. So they're my first team out of the field, pretty much running it back, right? They lose Sean Mobley, but they can just slide Jenkins down to the 4, and they have guys like Vince Williams who can play some 4. I mean, they have a really good point guard in Marcus Evans, who's more of a scoring guard, but nonetheless, Santos Silva took a big jump at center. They have some nice wings. They have a pretty strong 8 or 9 man rotation, and they're pretty much running it back after winning the A10 regular season last year.
Yeah, I mean they're in good shape. Also added Hassan Ward, which I like for them. I've watched some tape, really good stock riser, very very athletic. Just an absolute freak, 6'9" kid. Gonna run the floor, give it energy. Showed a little bit of ability to shoot it. I think he's going to be really nice. Maybe probably off the bench, play 15 minutes, give him energy. So VCU, I think they've got a really good roster. They've got guards, they've got veterans, they've got a good coach in Mike Rhodes. I'm pretty high on them. So that's my 15 through 20 was Alabama, Washington, Florida, Creighton, VCU, and Gonzaga.
Okay, I'll go with my 17 through 21 for me. Mississippi State at number 17. Don't feel super confident about that, but I mean they have a good point guard in Weatherspoon. I think Robert Woodard could take a step as a sophomore on the wing, and that's obviously dependent on Reggie Perry coming back and as a former 5-star taking a big step as a sophomore. I have Utah State with Keita at number 18. I mean he was horrible day one of the combine. He was probably the worst player there. From what I saw between those first 2 games, he was matched up against Taco Fall, who's a fast rising prospect. But I mean, he didn't have a lot of lift. He didn't have a lot of touch. He was kind of out of his place. But if you're playing in the combine scrimmage, you're an excellent college player. And with him back, Utah State would be certainly in the mix for a top 25 bid with Sam Merrill and bringing back a few of the other guards as well. 19, I have Houston. Very, very tough team to peg. Losing a guy like Corey Davis and Galen Robinson, guys who played a lot of minutes for them. Were very reliable, very strong defenders. They're going to be more long and athletic, playing guys like Hinton and Giroux more minutes. 20, I have Baylor, which I think has a sneaky good roster, especially with Tristan Clark back. They're just going to need either Davion Mitchell or Jared Butler to really take the reins. If not, they could have the worst point guard situation out of the top 25 for me. And then 21 LSU, which we touched on earlier, assuming Mays and Williams return.
Yeah, it's just quickly on Utah State. Keita was a guy who I started to sour on as a prospect, kind of down the stretch. I just thought like you saw the physical tools and you saw like the defensive instincts, but like in the passing even. But he's just slow. Like every decision he makes is very slow. He doesn't have a ton of burst, as you said. I mean, it doesn't quite add up yet. I think he should go back. But I mean, so you're kind of in the right ballpark for me, at least with a lot of these teams. I did Houston at 21, Purdue at 22. Which I thought was an interesting team. Mississippi State at 23, Utah State at 24, and Georgia wrapping up my top 25.
Yeah, Purdue just missed for me at number 27. I really wanted to get them in. I thought that they would be good. The Eastern and Proctor backcourt I think was really interesting, and then you also have Eric Hunter as a guy who played more as the season went on. I've always been a big Matt Harms guy at center, and Travion Williams played really well last year. But the team was just so tightly built last year, and it just fit so perfectly around guys in their role that I mean Edwards as a go-to scorer. Even if Proctor and Hunter are very good, they're going to be a downgrade from Edwards. And then losing Ryan Klein, I mean, Stefanovic was a nice rotation player. He's going to be a downgrade from Ryan Klein, who was a downgrade from Dakota Mathias. And then Eifert was like a big glue guy, intangibles guy. Evan Boudreau looks like he would be in that role. He doesn't quite have the same trust in Payne. He was in and out of the rotation. Probably looks like Aaron Wheeler would be the full-time foreman who had a great NCAA tournament, but there's a lot up in the air for Purdue, and there's a serious chance that their team just doesn't gel as well as it did this past year.
I'm big on Travion Williams and Aaron Wheeler. I think both of those guys are going to have very big years. I think Williams in particular, I mean, it's still tough for him to find minutes, but I think they're going to find like a 20-20 balance with Harms. He's going to be dominant. I think, Wheeler is such a dynamic athlete. Proctor's good. Stefanovic, as you said, kind of a downgrade. I thought Klein was terrific last year. I thought he was better than Mathias' senior year. I really did, just with his shot making. I mean, they're a tough team to peg. Really big Painter fan. So I will bank on Purdue as a top 25 team over some of the other teams I could have ranked.
Okay, and then just rounding out mine, 4 teams left. 22 is Xavier, who I think they'll have a really strong core if all those guys come back. Scruggs, Gooden. Marshall's already announced his intent to come back, and then Tyreek Jones. And then they add a stretch 4 and Jason Carter. And they have a really strong recruiting class that could be eased in off the bench, led by Kai Tandy, who's a combo guard. Georgia at 23, obviously with Claxton returning. We touched on them earlier. Ohio State, for me, falls to 24. Another team with a great mix of veterans and youth. I think the youth is more likely to take over here, especially at the 3 of the 4. I mean, Wesson is a very good player, but they have a few top 50 guys kind of nipping at his heels. So it's gonna be interesting to see kind of how they balance that, and just if they have enough talent right now. Like, they have plenty of young talent, but are guys like DJ Carton and Alonzo Gaffney and EJ Little as freshmen going to be good enough to kind of lead Ohio State higher than this spot? I mean, they have a great best player in Caleb Wesson. It's going to be interesting to see how all these young and old pieces mix. And then 25, I have Villanova, which I think they could have a really, really good defense. I'm not sure how they score.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting because they were best with Booth kind of running the show and Gillespie playing off the ball. They're not going to be able to kind of have that same luxury. There's going to be a lot of ISO from Brian Antoine. There's going to be a lot of expectation on Sadiq Bey to step up and go create shots. I think Jermaine Samuels had a couple moments there that made you think he could do it. Don't want to totally count out a guy like Brandon Slater, a guy like Cole Swider. I mean, those are good players. I think, Justin Moore, top 60 recruit, guy who can score the ball as a guard. I mean, I think their backcourt, it's kind of a bunch of parts that we don't totally know what they are, but all of them have potential.
Yeah, I would love to have Jermaine Samuels or like Sadiq Bey as like my 3rd or 4th best player. I'm just not sure that Brian Antoine being their best scorer as a freshman, I think that's definitely going to be a clear downgrade from Booth. And then I guess Samuels tries to assume the Eric Paschal role. Robinson Earl is a really good player, and he'll be like a sneaky one and done guy just because he fits the modern NBA center. Because he's very mobile, he can stretch the floor, he's an excellent defender, plays extremely hard. But he's best as like a really good role player. And I think that this roster has too many guys that are in that mold. Bey, Samuels, Robinson Earl, DCR, Gillespie. I think they have a lot of really good supporting casts, and for them to reach their, where people are projecting them, they're going to need guys to really emerge as, star pieces, which I think a lot of people pegged on this year's team, like a Javon Quinterly, to kind of take that step and it didn't come into fruition.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just kind of looking at their KenPom page and like, why was Villanova not great, right? Like they were decent defensively, not great. They were very good offensively still. I mean, for all the talk about it, they're still top 16 offense in the country. They shot the ball decent, 35%, could be better. I mean, the things they lacked last year was like general defensive playmaking. I don't know how that will kind of impact things, especially without Pascal. They need like Sadiq Bey or Samuels to become that very versatile defender who can make plays, get steals, blocks, etc. Yeah, I mean they didn't force turnovers. They didn't foul a ton. Like they were just like a very mediocre defense as a whole, and would love to see a little improvement on that front.
I mean, they were so reliant on Booth and Pascal offensively, and those guys would really wear down at the end of games. I mean, they would be hanging in there early, and then you could tell, Booth and Pascal, they weren't getting the same quality shot as they were getting earlier in the game. It kind of reminded me of 2 seasons ago, Creighton with Kyrie Thomas and Marcus Foster, where they were so reliant on those two guys to create. When those guys were kind of taken out of the game by the opposing defense, the other pieces, they just couldn't do it.
Yeah, I'll buy that. So I would say that's the team with one of the bigger ranges was Virginia and Villanova, who I had 10 and 11, and you had 25 and unranked or unranked 25.
Essentially, Virginia's my 30. The team that I had 29, I think, is also deserving of being in the top 25. And that's Davidson. I was pretty much running it back as well.
Yeah, but they're running it back.
Two great guards.
They're running it back from a different level.
I would say the same level as St. Mary's.
St. Mary's was an at-large team.
No, they weren't.
I mean, they were 31 in KenPom. I mean, like they didn't get in. They might not get in because they had a lot of losses, but like. Davidson was, let's find him in KenPom, 85 in KenPom.
Yeah, I mean they have two really good guards and great coach. I mean, people want to bet on Beeline, bet on few. I mean, Bob McKillop is as good of a coach as there is. They did a young front court who's getting older. I mean, I think that Davidson could easily be ranked.
I think top 50, top 25 is a little rich for my blood, but, I'll buy that.
A couple other teams that I don't think that you can rank, but they would be right outside for me. Providence and Georgetown. I think you can make a case for Minnesota. I think you can make a case for New Mexico. Just given all the talent they had. And two teams that were right on the cusp for me. When we did this exercise right before the championship, who fallen down in my mind for some reason, NC State and Notre Dame. Yes. I had them like 25 and 26 respectively. I guess they lost DJ Harvey since then, Notre Dame. But for some reason, it was just taking a look at these rosters. I don't know if these other teams just got so much better or what, but they just didn't measure up the same way that they did the first time for me.
Yeah, I'll buy that. One team I wanted to kind of touch on in a team that I like sort of thought about ranking was Arkansas. Like, don't think I would do it. Don't know that they're even a tournament team, but like Jalen Harris, Mason Jones, Isaiah Joe, Isaiah Moss, 1, 2, 3, 4 guards. I mean, I don't know if you're gonna play all 4 at a time, but like that's a lot of fun. I will say that. That's a really fun backcourt. Yeah,
I had them 10th in the SEC.
Okay.
But that would be, for me, that's bubble or even in. Because I had, I touched on earlier that my 2 through 6, I had a very hard time distinguishing. Same with my 7 through 10, maybe even 11, with Auburn at 7, Tennessee at 8, Ole Miss at 9, Arkansas at 10, and then Missouri kind of in there at 11. I think that you can make a case. I mean, a lot of people are going to be ranking Auburn and Tennessee. I don't necessarily see that. I still think that Auburn's definitely a tournament team. Tennessee, I'm, waffling back and forth on. Ole Miss should be solid. and then I think Arkansas is right in there. You mentioned earlier that their front court's a little lacking, but they'll have a ton of shooters, and they have the pieces, I think, to be able to play a really effective small ball lineup.
Yeah, I mean, they just don't have a big at all. Like, they have no one who I'm confident will rebound at a high level. Like, Reggie Chaney, maybe.
It's gonna be Chaney, Bailey, and Henderson. Those are the guys, unless Vanover gets a waiver.
I mean, Manover's not going to rebound for you, though. So, I mean, it's interesting. I will say Tennessee would be ranked if I thought Jordan Bone was coming back. Because I know he's still technically open.
So you would have Bone, Turner, Bowden, James, and Fulkerson?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good backcourt. Really good. So, I mean, it was interesting. Was there any other teams I wanted to mention to you that we didn't touch on the podcast already? I don't think so.
Where would you rank Providence?
35-40.
I would have them touch high, like 30, 31-35 for me.
I guess my question is, like, how much does Luwani Pipkins fix things? Like,
I think
maybe, like, because like, best outcome, right, is like now you have a ball handler who can go create a shot, and David Duke gets better, and AJ Reeves is healthy, and Malik White's still useful, and Nate Watson gets better. Like, then you're talking, like, okay. But I mean, Pipkins was really, really good as a sophomore on a team that had no options, and then was like not great last year. Like, good, not great.
Yeah, I think if Providence didn't have Pipkins, I think that you could still put them in the tournament mix. I mean, they would be bringing back, most of their everyone except for Isaiah Jackson, really, from the NIT team. I think Pipkins certainly raises their ceiling. My hope is that they don't really even need to use him, right? Because the knock on him is he's so inefficient. My hope is they can use him in a sixth-man role. Doesn't seem like he would accept that, but I think we're gonna have to live with kind of his warts and all. But I mean, they have a pretty strong and experienced eight-man rotation. Their defense is gonna be really good. It's just gonna be if Pipkins can kind of assimilate there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the six-man thing really solves the problem. It's like Duke has to solve the problem, and then Pipkins would just be a luxury.
Well, yeah, that's what I was saying. That my hope is that the White, Duke, Reeves, Diallo, Watson lineup is good enough offensively where we don't have to play this spark plug, except when we need to off the bench.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting because it does kind of make things a little more difficult defensively. Just because he's so small, he's not a great defender. His effort isn't really there on that end. But I mean, he's big for this team. I think Providence will be good. The real question, Brad, where would you rank Northwestern? They're loaded up with 6'9" white dudes who can shoot and have a weird skill set, and 6'6" wings who aren't point guards.
Yeah, sorry
for that.
I have Northwestern last right now. I mean,
you should.
I saw that they're in the mix for Kareem South, which
doesn't really help.
But it's better than what they have, right?
Well, so right now, I would project Northwestern starting no waiver for Chase Audich, which seems very likely. Because Chase Audich, the waiver argument for him is his coach got fired. So unless they open that floodgate, he's not getting it. So the projected starting lineup I would have for Northwestern, if the season started tomorrow, would be, oh man, let's go Turner, Gaines, Kopp, Barron, Jared Jones, and Bowie, Pete Nance, Bowie, Pete Nance, Kareem South if you get him, Ryan Young as your 9.
So you wouldn't even start a Kareem South if even if he's there?
I mean, you might. I mean, he's not point guard though. Like Northwestern's problem is not like Anthony Gaines.
Yeah.
Like Anthony Gaines is better than Kareem South. I think like if you add Kareem South, like it can't hurt you. And it's like he helps like for a year as a backup guard, and then he goes. I would ideally add like Kareem South and Ed Morrow, and then usually get the scholarships back and then hold one because Northwestern still has 3.
Yeah. What is Morrow doing? I mean, he's got to get out of there.
Yeah, he really does. The other real question though, Brad, where would you rank a Jalen Pickett Siena team? You got like Pickett, NBA prospect, although looked bad at the G League camp. You got Carey, you got Burns, you got Sloan Seymour. Might be like a top 150 team, maybe even top 100.
I haven't taken a look at the rest of the MAC yet. Are they better than everyone else? Like would they be the favorite going in?
There's basically 3 teams you can argue for if Pickett's back: Siena, Iona, and Ryder. Ryder probably has the most raw talent, but their coaching is bad and they're very mentally fragile. Like they had the most talent by far this year and like just imploded, and we don't know that that's going to be fixed because they haven't had like big roster turnover or anything that would indicate they might fix. I mean, they had no shooting and they lost their best shooter, so I mean that's also a concern. Then there's Iona, which like they'll be there, right? But like they don't have a point guard. Yeah, they have a point guard if Isaiah Washington gets a waiver. Which will be interesting. I mean, he was not a point guard at Minnesota. His assist turnover ratio was good, but like they refused to play him a point guard. So it'll be fun. Iona's probably the favorite. I think you have to just give them credit just for what they've done year over year. But I mean, Siena's got the best player in the MAC. Siena's got 2 other guys who I would say top 10 in the MAC, in Carey and Burns. And then maybe they add one more guy. So we'll see there. That'll be a fun team to watch. So in case we always appreciate you all joining us for our rant about our teams at the end of the podcast. It's always fun, Brad. I know you enjoy it as well.
Absolutely, and I hope Siena can find a grad transfer and a sit out big man.
Hey, we got our grad transfer. We got a grad transfer guard, Matt Hine. I don't know if
we need another one.
Yeah, we're still thin at guard. I think the thing with guard is like, ideally they would just play like Pickett at point for like 32 minutes and like Carey at point for 8 minutes, and then like Carey at the 2 for like 25 minutes and like Hine at the 2 for 15. So then like Carey plays like 32 minutes, Pickett plays 32 minutes, Hine plays 15, and that's your backcourt. But like that's injury hell very quickly. So we'll see what happens. I don't know what the staff is looking at. But yeah, plenty of time. I mean, I feel like rosters are more in flux right now, not just because of draft decisions, but like everyone has spots right now, which is crazy.
I mean, some teams like Pitt and Cal and Virginia Tech, I mean, they have like 6 spots open each.
Oregon's got 7.
Yeah, Oregon too.
6. Oregon's got 6.
I mean, that team could have been special if they.
Oregon should still be rankable if they get good players because like there's 6 or 7. The 6 eligible players are really good.
Yeah.
They just need to like if they had like Khalid Thomas and like Javen Cumberland, who I know they're looking at, and like one more immediate eligible guy like a JUCO or like a reclass, like that's a top 25 team, no doubt. But like I can't rank a team with 6 players right now.
No.
It is.
If Wooten was back and if Bailey was back, I mean, that's a top 10 team.
Yeah. Luke King, too.
And then even higher with King, too. Yeah.
Anyway, that's another interesting team. We'll have plenty more over the next couple of weeks. We'll have draft decisions at this time next week. Well, we won't quite because if you're listening live, which you wouldn't be because this is a Skype call, but it is 9:58 Central Time on Wednesday the 22nd. So 1 hour from now, we would have our draft decisions in. So yeah, I mean that's that. So we always appreciate you listening to the show. Please sure to join us next week whenever we do record next. Not sure when that will be. It's been a busy time for both of us, but off season's always fun, and we look forward to bringing you the best content for the rest of the off season. Don't go anywhere on the CB Central podcast. Thank you.